Unine greetings, welcome back to Dystopia. Have you been with me since the beginning? If you have, it became a little weird last time, didn't it? There was a song in 1984, da 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 dee. Well, yeah, it's a little weird, a little strange, but hopefully a little knowledge there as well. Last time you studied the word abhorrent. We need to revise this before we push on. Abhorrent means detestable, hateful. Stalin, you may remember from last lesson, was abhorrent because he hid the fact that his people in Russia around 1920 were suffering, were poor, maybe were starving. And you also looked to the word scrutinize with me last lesson, and it's one of those techniques that the government, Orwellian governments, use to do what? What scrutiny? Scrutiny is observation. It's studying something closely. How does the scrutiny of the government create fear and tension in the first half of chapter 1? Do you remember how Winston went up to his apartment and was afraid of something looking through the window or something monitoring him, something fixed to the wall? I'll leave that to you. And predicament. What's predicament? It's a difficult, unpleasant, or embarrassing situation, a fix, a problem, the soup, an embarrassing situation. So let's go back to the front. How does the reader make Winston's sorry, there's something in the way. How does Orwell make the reader view Winston's predicament in chapter 1? So how do you feel about Winston, basically? Remember, he's unwell. He lives on his lift's broken. The hallway smells of boiled cabbage. How do you feel about Winston? Let's move on. Today, I don't want you to send anything to your teachers because there's a bit of an assessment in a few days' time. So just consider this practice. So in this lesson, you're going to look at the second half of chapter 1, and you're going to examine how fear and tension are created. I'm going to show you how to write a mini PEE, point evidence explained paragraph. Last lesson, I told you about Orwellian governments, and Orwellian takes its origins from the name of George Orwell, who wrote 1984 and some other dystopian novels that forecast problems developing, problems like poverty or surveillance states or totalitarian governments. You see him here with his wife or girlfriend and some soldiers when he was fighting as a communist. And here working as a propaganda expert for the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. And here you see an example of a totalitarian government. Have a good look, by the way, at Stalin's face. Look at his face in the middle. That's Stalin. You'll need that later. Stalin is allegorized by the character of Big Brother because he doctored this photograph, or he arranged for this photograph to be altered so that the man on his left or our right, Nikolai Yezhov, vanished because he disagreed with the government. He became a rebel that disappeared or unpersoned. And then you looked at how Joseph Stalin covered the fact that his population was starving and poor. Only 6% of them had more than one room in their dilapidated, shabby homes, cheap homes. Despite that, he called himself Uncle Joe and marketed himself as this generous, benevolent leader. And so, in summary, Orwellian governments control the public through propaganda. They use surveillance and scrutiny of the public's actions. They spread disinformation. So all of those so far we've seen in chapter 1. Remember, hate week, advertising pig iron, and the telly screen that monitors Winston. The past has changed in the press, and political doublespeak puts a positive gloss on things. Remember, what we were talking about? The economy drive in Winston's government. The economy drive are keeping people poor, keeping apartments in bad condition, but it's really just either the government's corrupt or they aren't spending. So we're going to read the second half of chapter 1 and write about it. And we're going to look at dystopian conventions and how fear and tension are created. So let me leave this program somehow, and then jump into a different program. Word. Let's find Word. In 1984, I can see it. Here it is. 1984, Chapter 1 extract. I hope you can see this. So you have been sent this copy. Perhaps you sent it with a previous email. Perhaps it's in class charts. So let's go to. So we started this. We met Winston earlier. Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading from the telly screen. Big Brother's watching you. Highlighted is the poster that's all around. Black Mustachio's face. The helicopters snoop through the windows, highlighted. And let's start from here. Any sound that Winston made above the level of a very low whisper would be picked up by the telescreen. Moreover, so long as he remained within the field of vision, which the metal plaque commanded, he could be seen as well as heard. Let's go slightly further down. Winston kept his back turned to the telescreen, so I suppose tension is created because Winston doesn't have free will, doesn't have freedom of movement. And let's go down to the Ministry of Truth. The Ministry of Truth, mini-true in Newspeak. Oh, by the way, Nazi is a portmanteau word of national and socialism in Germany. So they, just like mini-true is a combination of Ministry of Truth, use a sufficient way of reducing language. It's called a portmanteau word. The Ministry of Truth was startlingly different from any other object in sight. It was an enormous pyramidal structure of glittering white concrete soaring up terrace after terrace, 300 meters into the air. From where Winston stood, it was just possible to read, picked out on its white face and elegant lettering, the three slogans of the party. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Governments use lists of three to make slogans stick in the mind. And it's also doublespeak, isn't it? Ignorance is strength. How is that possible? The Ministry of Truth contained, it was said, 3,000 rooms above ground level and corresponding ramifications below. Scattered about London, there were just 3 other buildings of similar appearance and size. So I suppose you could say fear and tension is created, or fear is created by the size of the government buildings that dwarf the surrounding architecture. That from the roof of Victory Mansions, where Winston lives, you could see all 4 of them simultaneously, these totems of government power, always watching. Ironically, down here, the Ministry of Love maintained law and order, and the Ministry of Plenty, which was responsible for the economic affairs. Their names in Newspeak were Mini True, Mini Pax, Mini Love, and Mini Plenty. The Ministry of Love, now have a look at this with fear and tension. The Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. There were no windows at all. Winston had never been inside the Ministry of Love, nor within half a kilometre of it. It was a place impossible to enter except on official business. There's something about it having no windows. Yes, I think I've read that. So Winston potters around his flats, trying to hide what he's doing, and then he drinks this Victory gin stuff. Now, this is cheap entertainment provided by the state. Victory gin, Victory cigarettes, Victory tea, I suppose. It's a satire on communist techniques, basically giving everybody something but nobody something very good, because it's cheaper to do that and it keeps people happy. You'll notice that, I suppose, in budgets in England, beer and cigarettes, well, sometimes the tax on beer doesn't go up too much, because if it did, then people would be too unhappy in general. So Victory Gin gives off a sickly, oily smell. Look out for this sense of discomfort running through. So tension, as in physical tension, fear, as in the fear of punishment. Instantly, his face turned scarlet and the water ran out of his eyes. The stuff was like nitric acid, and moreover, in swallowing it, one had the sensation of being hit on the back of the head. Then he loses his tobacco because it's so cheap and dry. You're too young to know about that. Then, by sitting in the alcove and keeping well back, Winston was able to remain outside the range of the telescreen. He could be heard, of course, but so long as he stayed in his present position, he could not be seen. So what's Winston trying to do? He takes out a diary. This paragraph explains how he bought a book and carried it guiltily home. Remember, I mentioned a couple of lessons ago about people who know the least obey the best. So Big Brother has banned books, yet Winston feels guilty having bought one. So he opens a diary and he's afraid that he's going to be punished by death for doing it, but he does it anyway. And then right at the end, he starts writing. Suddenly, he began writing in sheer panic, only imperfectly aware of what he was setting down. His small but childish handwriting straggled up and down the page. What does Winston write? Well, I'm going to show you in a video summary I made a little earlier. Now, bear with me while I make sure the sound is switched on and leap back into PowerPoint. Where is it? In 1984. Is that right? I don't think that's right. Is this right? I think this is right. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a quick video of what we've just discussed. If YouTube wakes up. Hang on, let me check that I switched the audio one, because this was tricky. Sorry about this. In 1984. Include computer sound. So it's worth making sure of those things. Otherwise, I'll be half asleep if I have to do this again. Here we go. Telescreen still babbling away. I can be seen as well as heard. Victory, Gin. Tastes like nitric acid. The Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. There were no windows in it at all. Even the streets leading up to its outer barriers were roamed by guards armed with truncheons. If I keep well back, I'm able to remain outside the range of the telescreen. The thing I'm about to do is open a diary. It isn't illegal, but if detected, it's reasonably certain that I'd be punished by death. Okay, that's my Secret Santa present making another appearance. Where are we? Okay, so let's do some writing. Orwell creates fear. So the question is, how does Orwell create fear and tension? Okay, do you need to see that question? I need you to write 1 or 2 paragraphs in response to this. How does Orwell create fear and tension in chapter 1? So look at the paragraph. So how are you going to approach this? You're saying, how am I going to start? We start with a quotation. I like this, the guards armed with jointed truncheons. So there's the threat of violence and brutality. So Orwell creates fear and tension when, what do you need next? The evidence. When the Ministry of Love is said to be controlled by guards with truncheons. 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 So the next thing to do is explain how that shows fear, I suppose. The detail shows successfully that the guards either face danger or are dangerous themselves. That'll do for a mini PE. If you want to extend it, perhaps analyze why they're carrying truncheons. You could say this is probably the case to remind the population that disobedience is punishable with violence. So it's that Orwellian government threatening people with brutality and to keep people obedient. And what about a different interpretation? This is probably the case because several elements of the population want to show their frustrations. So people want to rebel with violent protest against a totalitarian government. Or why not use both? This could either be because protests are common or the government wants to threaten its population with violence. So just why not, instead of choosing one or the other explanation, go for both? Miss Chillingworth loves this. It's, what is it? It's alternative perspective or something. And then a little context about Orwell. It was Orwell's intention to reflect how totalitarian leaders such as Stalin and Hitler used intimidation and violence to create an obedient population. Not necessary always to put this context point at the end because it makes the paragraphs too long, but you should drop them in once or twice, 2 or 3 times maybe. So there's the optional context at the end. In brackets in red, I've reinforced my point by adding another quotation. Instead of saying the detail successfully shows that the guards either face danger or are dangerous, I've said the detail reinforced by a reference to the machine gun nests on the building shows that the ministry is a dangerous place. So, should we try one more? This is something about tension. So the gin tastes like acid. So next, Orwell creates tension when, what's the evidence? Winston's drink is said to taste like acid. Now, what's the terminology? The something shows successfully like nitric acid. What is that? Simile metaphor. Simile. The simile shows successfully that. And what's he trying to do by saying it's like nitric acid? How does that show tension? Paraphrase the quotation, put it into your own words. The drink makes Winston feel nauseous. And why is it so cheap? It's probably because it's cheap entertainment provided by the state. And then your optional context at the end. It reflects how totalitarian governments rule with terror over impoverished societies. Remember how Stalin poor and fearful. So then the next paragraph's over to you. Then Orwell creates fear and tension when what? It's over to you. So just write a paragraph. And oh, by the way, did you spot Stalin's face in the video? I'm sure you did.